Hey everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel and welcome to my very first video. I make videos about solved and unsolved crime cases from all around the world. I post at least once a week, so hit that subscribe button, grab your blanket, grab your snacks, and let's get spooked together. Today's video is about the unsolved case of Elizabeth Short, also known as the Black Dahlia. Elizabeth Short was born on July 29, 1924, in the Hyde Park section of Boston, Massachusetts, the third of 5 daughters of Cleo and Phoebe Short. Elizabeth's father built miniature golf courses until the 1929 stock market crash, when he lost most of his savings and the family became broke. In 1930, her father's car was found abandoned on the Charlestown Bridge, and it was assumed that he has committed suicide by jumping into the Charles River. Believing her husband to be deceased, Elizabeth's mother moved her 5 daughters into a small apartment in Medford and worked as a bookkeeper to support them. In late 1942, Elizabeth's mother received a letter of apology from her presumed deceased husband, which revealed that he was in fact alive and had started a new life in California. In December of 1942, at age 18, Elizabeth relocated to live with her father, whom she had not seen since she was 6 years old. At the time, he was working at the nearby Mare Island Naval Shipyard on San Francisco Bay. Arguments between Elizabeth and her father led to her moving out in January of 1943. Shortly after, she took a job at the base exchange at Camp Cook, near Lompoc, living with several friends and briefly with an Army Air Force sergeant who reportedly abused her. Elizabeth left Lompoc in mid-1943 and moved to Santa Barbara, where she was arrested on September 23, 1943 for underage drinking at a local bar. The juvenile authorities sent her back to Medford, but she returned instead to Florida, making only occasional visits to Massachusetts. While in Florida, Elizabeth met Major Matthew Michael Gordon, Jr., a decorated Army Force officer at the 2nd Air Commando Group. He was training for deployment to the China-Burma-India Theater of Operations of World War II. Elizabeth told friends that Gordon had written to propose marriage while he was recovering from injuries from a plane crash in India. She accepted his offer, but Gordon unfortunately died in a second crash on August 10, 1945, less than a week before the surrender of Japan ended the war. Elizabeth spent the last 6 months of her life in Southern California, mostly in the Los Angeles area. Shortly before her death, she had been working as a waitress and rented a room behind the Florentine Gardens nightclub on Hollywood Boulevard. Elizabeth has been variously described and depicted as an aspiring or would-be actress. According to some sources, she did in fact have aspirations to be a film star, though she had no known acting jobs or credits. On January 9, 1947, Elizabeth returned to her home in Los Angeles after a brief trip to San Diego with Robert Manley, a 25-year-old married salesman she had been dating. Manley stated that he dropped Elizabeth off at the Biltmore Hotel in downtown Los Angeles, and that Elizabeth was to meet her sister, who was visiting from Boston that afternoon. By some accounts, staff of the Biltmore recalled having seen Elizabeth using the lobby telephone. Shortly after, she was allegedly seen by patrons of the Crown Grill Cocktail Lounge, approximately 0.4 miles away from the Biltmore Hotel. On the morning of January 15, 1947, Elizabeth's naked body was found severed into 2 pieces on a vacant lot in Leimert Park, Los Angeles. At the time, the neighborhood was largely undeveloped. Local resident Betty Bersinger discovered the body at approximately 10 a.m. while walking with her 3-year-old daughter. Bersinger initially thought she had found a discarded store mannequin. When she realized it was a corpse, she rushed to a nearby house and called the police. Elizabeth's severely mutilated body was completely severed at the waist and drained of blood, leaving her skin a pallid white. Medical examiners determined that she had been dead for hours prior to the discovery, leaving her time of death either sometime during the evening of January 14 or early morning hours of January 15. The body had been washed by the killer. Elizabeth's face had been slashed from the corners of her mouth to her ears, creating an effect known as the Glasgow smile. She had several cuts on her thigh and breasts where entire portions of flesh had been sliced away. The lower half of her body was positioned a foot away from the upper. The corpse had been posed with her hands over her head, her elbows bent at right angles, and her legs spread apart. Near the body, detectives located a heel print on the ground amid the tire tracks, and a cement sack containing watery blood was also found nearby. An autopsy of Elizabeth's body was performed on January 16, 1947, by Frederick Newbar, the Los Angeles County coroner. The cause of death was determined to be hemorrhaging from the lacerations to the face and the shock, and from blows to the head and face. Elizabeth was identified after her fingerprints were sent to the FBI. Immediately following Elizabeth's identification, reporters contacted her mother, Phoebe Short, in Boston, and told her that her daughter had won a beauty contest. It was only after prying as much personal information as they could from Phoebe that the reporters revealed that her daughter had in fact been murdered. The newspaper offered to pay her airfare and accommodations if she would travel to Los Angeles to help with the police investigation. The media nicknamed her as the Black Dahlia and described her as an adventuress who prowled Hollywood Boulevard. On January 21, 1947, a person claiming to be Elizabeth's killer placed a phone call to the office of James Richardson, the editor of the Examiner, congratulating Richardson on the newspaper coverage of the case, and stated he planned on eventually turning himself in, but not before allowing police to pursue him further. Additionally, the caller told Richardson to expect some souvenirs of Beth Short in the mail. On January 24, a suspicious manila envelope was discovered by a U.S. Postal Service worker. The envelope had been addressed to the Los Angeles Examiner and other Los Angeles papers, with individual words that had been cut and pasted from newspaper clippings. Additionally, a large message on the face of the envelope read, "Here is Dahlia's belongings." The envelope contained Elizabeth's birth certificate, business cards, photographs, names written on pieces of paper, and an address book with the name Mark Hansen embossed on the cover. The pocket had been carefully cleaned with gasoline, similar to Elizabeth's body, which led police to suspect the packet had been sent directly by her killer. Despite the efforts to clean the packet, several partial fingerprints were lifted from the envelope and sent to the Federal Bureau of Investigation for testing. However, the prints were compromised in transit and thus could not be properly analyzed. The same day the packet was received by the Examiner, a handbag and a black suede shoe were reported to have been seen on top of a garbage can in an alley a short distance from Norton Avenue, 2 miles from where Elizabeth's body had been discovered. The items were recovered by police, but they had also been wiped clean with gasoline, destroying any fingerprints. On March 14, an apparent suicide note scrawled in pencil on a bit of paper was found tucked in a shoe in a pile of men's clothing by the ocean's edge at the foot of Rees Avenue, Venice. The note read, "To whom it may concern, I have waited for the police to capture me for the Black Dahlia killing, but have not. I am too much of a coward to turn myself in, so this is the best way out for me. I couldn't help myself for that, or this. Sorry, Mary." The clothes gave no clue about the identity of the owner. Police quickly deemed Mark Hansen, the owner of the address book found in the packet, a suspect. Hansen was a wealthy local nightclub and theater owner and an acquaintance of whose home Elizabeth had stayed with friends, and according to some sources, he also confirmed that the purse and shoe discovered in the alley were in fact Elizabeth's. Anne Toth, Elizabeth's friend and roommate, told the investigators that Short had recently rejected sexual advances from Hansen and suggested it as a potential cause for him to kill her. However, he was cleared of suspicion in the case. In addition to Hansen, the Los Angeles Police Department interviewed over 150 men in the ensuing weeks whom they believed to be potential suspects. Mainly, who had been one of the last people to see Short alive, was also investigated, but was cleared of suspicion after passing numerous polygraph examinations. Police also interviewed several persons found listed in Hansen's address book, including Martin Lewis, who had been an acquaintance of Elizabeth's. Lewis was able to provide an alibi for the date of Short's murder, as he was in Portland, Oregon, visiting his father-in-law who was dying of kidney failure. A total of 750 investigators from the LAPD and other departments worked on the case during its initial stages, including 400 sheriff's deputies and 250 California State Patrol officers. Various locations were searched for potential evidence, including storm drains throughout Los Angeles, abandoned structures, and various sites along the Los Angeles River, but the searches yielded no further evidence. City Councilman Lloyd G. Davis posted a $10,000 reward for information leading police to Short's killer, which is equivalent to $115,000 in 2020. After the announcement of the reward, various persons came forward with confessions, most of which the police dismissed as false. Several of the false confessors were charged with obstruction of justice. On January 26, another letter was received by the examiner, this time handwritten, which read, "Here it is, turning in Wednesday, January 29, 10 a.m. Had my fun at the police, Black Dahlia Avenger." The letter also named a location at which the supposed killer would turn himself in. Police waited at the location on the morning of January 29, but the alleged killer did not appear. Instead, at 1 p.m., the examiner offices received another cut and pasted letter, which read, "Have changed my mind. You would not give me a square deal. Dahlia killing was justified." The graphic nature of the crime and the subsequent letters received by the examiner had resulted in a media frenzy surrounding Elizabeth's murder. Both local and national publications covered the story heavily, many of which reprinted sensationalistic reports suggesting that Elizabeth had been tortured for hours prior to her death. The information, however, was false, yet police allowed the reports to circulate so as to conceal Elizabeth's true cause of death, cerebral hemorrhage, from the public. The Herald Express also received several letters from the purported killer, again made with cut and pasted clippings, one of which read, "I will give up on Dahlia killing if I get 10 years. Don't try to find me." On February 1, the Los Angeles Daily News reported that the case had run into a stone wall, with no new leads for investigators to pursue. The Examiner continued to run stories on the murder and the investigation, which was front-page news for 35 days following the discovery of the body. When interviewed, lead investigator Captain Jack Donahue told the press that he believed Short's murder had taken place in a remote building or shack on the outskirts of Los Angeles, and her body transported into the city where it was disposed of. Based on the precise cuts and dissection of Short's corpse, the LAPD looked into the possibility that the murder had been a surgeon, doctor, or someone with medical knowledge. In mid-February 1947, the LAPD served a warrant to the University of Southern California Medical School, which was located near the site where Short's body had been discovered, requesting a complete list of the program's students. The university agreed so long as the students' identities remained private. Background checks were conducted but yielded no results. By the spring of 1947, Short's murder had become a cold case with few new leads. Sergeant Finis Brown, one of the lead detectives on the case, blamed the press for compromising the investigation through reporters' probing of details in unverified reporting. In September 1949, a grand jury convened to discuss inadequacies in the LAPD's homicide unit based on the failure to solve numerous murders, especially those of women and children in the past several years, Short's being one of them. In the aftermath of the grand jury, further investigation was done on Short's past, with detectives tracing her movements between Massachusetts, California, and Florida, and also interviewed people who knew her in Texas and New Orleans. However, the interviews yielded no useful information in the murder. The notoriety of Short's murder has spurred a large number of confessions over the years, many of which had been deemed false during the initial investigation into her murder. Police received a total of 60 confessions, most made by men. Since that time, over 500 people have confessed to the crime, some of whom had not even been born at the time of her death. Sergeant John B. St. John, a detective who worked the case until his retirement, stated, "It is amazing how many people offer up a relative as the killer." Thank you for watching. Comment down below about what you guys thought about this case. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you SuSCrimers next week.